Hello dear students, welcome to this lecture of Strategic Human Resource Management. We will be talking about the topic of employee separation in this session, and I am Dr. Tripti Barthwal. I am Director, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management and Development Studies, Lucknow. So, we are all familiar with the fact that the HR manager has to perform certain operative functions, which includes recruitment, selection, training and development, integration and compensation, and a very important, the last function is employee separation also. So, it may sound strange that the HR manager gets involved or the HR function starts from that point where the employee has not even joined the organization, he is not even a part of the organization. It starts from the searching of those employees for the organization, and it continues even after the employee has left the organization, he is no more a part of the organization. So, we will talk about this very important function of human resource manager, that is employee separation. So, employee separation occurs when the employee ceases to be a member of the organization and employee leaves the organization. Simple, it is very clear from the term only. The employment agreement between the employer and employee comes to an end when the employee leaves the organization. So, that contract, that agreement between the employer and employee ceases as a result of separation. If the rate of separation is high, it is a sign of instability. It is not a good thing for the organization to have a very high employee turnover rate. So, if the rate of attrition or turnover, or if the rate of employees quitting the organization is very high, then it is an alarm sign for the organization. But because it continuity and the profitability and the functioning of the organization is drastically negatively affected. And however, a moderate turnover of employees is always good for the firm, since new employees bring experience, new ideas and new outlook with them. But if we think that there should not be any employee separation to maintain the good for the organization, then that is also not a very correct view, because when new employees come into the organization, then they bring new ideas and they have new ways, new approaches of thinking and working, and as a result of that there can be improvements in the organization. So, some amount of turnover is good, some amount of employee separation is good for the organization, but beyond that then it can be a curse for the organization. So, we will talk about the types of employee separations. Now, these methods or these ways of employee separation can be divided broadly into two categories. The first are the voluntary separations and the second the involuntary separations. Now, from the name itself you can very well decipher that voluntary separations are those where the employee quits the organization or ends to be a member of the organization with his own will, with his own or her choice. So, that is voluntary separation. And when there is a choice, when the employee exercises his choice, then there can be two options in that. One is the employee resigns or he goes for VRS or voluntary retirement scheme. He makes use of VRS. The second is involuntary, wherein the employee does not want, he does not have the willingness to leave the organization, but he has to leave the organization because of compulsion and not by choice. So, there are several ways in which the employees can separate involuntarily: for dismissal, retrenchments, layoff and retirement. So, these are involuntary forms of separation, employee separation. So, we will talk about these types one by one in detail. First is resignation. So, resignation is a very common term. You all are aware what is resignation. The resignation can be for two main reasons. First are the professional reasons, that somebody getting a job, better position outside the organization, better package, better status, but better maybe allowances, better terms and conditions, better facilities. So, there can be a number of reasons for which, professional reasons, because of which the employee will like to quit the organization, current organization. So, employees may seek separation due to dissatisfaction with the current organization. So, basically for professional reasons, why will an organization, why will an employee leave? Because more or less he is dissatisfied. Dissatisfaction can be of a higher level, it can be of a lower level, average, but the basic reason is that he is not satisfied with his current organization. To seek better positions, responsibilities and status outside the present organization. So, there can be these reasons because of which the employee wants to quit, and of course, the better package, better position will come with a better compensation package. Then there can be personal reasons. The employee did not want to quit, but the conditions around his family, within his family, or his own personal health, because of which the employee has to leave the organization. So, important personal reasons for voluntary separation are relocation. The employee has moved to a new location. This happens especially in the case of females. It happens more because their father may get transferred to a new place, or their husband gets transferred to a new place, or because they get married and their husband is at a different location. So, movement can be because of personal reasons. Health crisis of family members or personal health reasons can be also there. Maternity and child rearing. So, these are main common causes of personal reasons because of which employees would resign from the organization. And the second important way by which employees leave the organization voluntarily is, as the name itself has this term, voluntary retirement scheme, or what we call as VRS in short. So, it is a very famous scheme when organizations give option to its employees to retire even before superannuation. It is called voluntary retirement. Superannuation means that is the age of retirement. So, before reaching the age of retirement, if the employer gives option to its employees to, if they want to quit or they want to leave the organization, then it is VRS. Employees in return of voluntary retirement are given lump sum payment, because of which this scheme is also popularly known as golden handshake. In common language, it is also known as golden handshake scheme, because when the employee goes for VRS, he accepts VRS, then in that case he gets one time good payment, good amount, and that is why it is said as golden handshake, because the last time the employee shakes hands with his employer, he gets golden things in its hand in that last handshake. That is how it signals a golden handshake. Now, what is the benefit to the organization? Why an organization will ask its employees to go for VRS? Simply because the organization is having surplus employees, does not want to spend too much on their salaries for so many years, and then a lot of other allowances. So, the employee is given a choice whether he or she wants to retire. And why the employee will exercise this scheme? The employee will use this scheme because in certain cases the employee does not have that kind of energy or does not want to work anymore. So, only 5 years, 10 years are left for retirement. So, the employee does not want to continue, and it is a very good option because the employee is getting a lot of money in one go. The employee opting for VRS are also eligible for all legal dues such as gratuity, pension, statutory bonus, provident fund, leave, salary, etc. So, none of their benefits are being curtailed, and above that they are getting a good handsome amount of payment, and that is why employees go for VRS. Now, you must be thinking that if the employer is spending so much of the on the employee, then why is he giving this option of VRS? Because ultimately he is spending so much, so why can't he retain the employee? See, what happens that salaries rise also. You do not want to pay an employee for next 10 years down the line, you have to pay, and even if the salary was fixed, then things would have been different. In a period of 10 years, at least 7-8 times the salary is going to rise. So, the cost incurred per employee is going to increase. So, as a result of that, the employers find it much worthful and much more prudent to give this option to employees and give them a handsome lump sum payment at one time. Though VRS is voluntary, in many cases it has become CRS, also known as iron handshake, to weed out poor performers. So, golden handshake scheme was introduced in order to reduce the bulk of employees, and so that the employees also do not face any challenges or any problems in their future life. But now VRS has given way to CRS. CRS is compulsory retirement scheme, that is, instead of giving this option to employees that who wants to retire, the employer himself will tell that these employees should opt for retirement. Before I dismiss them, they should opt for retirement, and now as it has been mentioned that it has taken the shape of iron handshake, that once you are making the last handshake with your employer, you do not get anything, right, you do not get much, right. So, that the lucrative part of the scheme has gone. Now, employers are using it to just make poor performers leave the organization. Now, coming to the involuntary types of employee separation, where the employee does not intend to quit the organization. First is dismissal. Now, dismissal, as the name suggests, when then an employee is asked to leave the organization, and generally it happens because the employee has done something grossly wrong, which is totally unjustifiable, which is totally you cannot inexcusable, which is like totally going against the law, totally against the policy of the organization, some sort of an act which can amount to indiscipline, then the employee is dismissed from the organization. So, it refers to the termination of services of an employee as a punitive measure. So, it is a type of punishment only. This may occur either on account of unsatisfactory performance or misconduct. So, if despite several reminders, several feedback, several warnings also, the performance of the employee is not improving, he is not ready either to improve or either to enhance his skills, sharpen his skills, then in that case the employer has no choice but to ask the employee to leave the organization, to dismiss his services. So, it can be because of unsatisfactory performance, or as I said, it can be because of indiscipline conducted by the employee again and again, or maybe one time act, but which cannot be just you cannot let it go. It is such a big act of which the employee has done that you have to ask him to move away from the organization. Persistent failure of employee to perform up to the expectations or specified standard is considered as unsatisfactory performance. So, for a continued period of time, the employee is not able to live up to the expectations or whatever are the standards of his job, it is considered as what is the definition of an unsatisfactory performance? That for a long period of time the employee is not delivering performance according to the expectations or according to the standards. Willful violation of rules and regulation by the employee is treated as misconduct. Dismissal seriously impairs the earnings and image of the employee. So, most of the times the employer will hesitate to dismiss the employee unless it is very much required. The employer takes this as the last step when there is no other alternative, then he takes this step of dismissing the employee. Otherwise, generally they will ask them to take retirement or something of that sort. Before an employee is dismissed, he must be served advance notice to explain his position. So, before this kind of a drastic action is meted out to the employee, he should be given a chance to explain his behavior, why he is behaving in that particular way, or why he did or committed that act of indiscipline. So, that is legally required. Then second is retrenchment. Retrenchment, it is a very common word. You must have studied that in industrial relations also, and it is known as chutney in Hindi. When like when we go to buy vegetables, then we pick, right, this is good for me, this is not good for me. So, similarly, if there is a situation in an organization where the employer has to pick certain employees and he has to just do away with certain employees, that is retrenchment or chutney. Retrenchment means permanent termination. It is also a permanent termination of an employees for economic reasons like surplus, staff, poor demand for products, general economic slowdown, etc. So, the difference between a dismissal and a retrenchment is, though they are both permanent termination of services, but that is because the employee is not performing or he is indisciplined. Here there is no question of indiscipline or performance, it is just because there is excess of staff or the products are not that much in demand in the market. So, we do not require those many employees, or there is a general slowdown in the economy as it is after COVID. So, at many organizations you must be hearing that employees are being retrenched. Termination of services on account of retirement, winding up of a business, illness or on disciplinary grounds does not constitute retrenchment. So, if the services of an employee are being terminated because he is retiring, or the business itself is being closed, or illness of the employee or disciplinary grounds, that will not be part of retrenchment. As per industrial, these all retrenchment, layoff and all these types of employee separations, they have been mentioned in the Industrial Disputes Act 1947. It says that in establishments employing 100 or more employees, the employer has to give 3 months notice or pay equivalent wages. If you cannot give a 3 months notice, then you have to pay equivalent amount of wages and an approval from government. While retrenching worker, the employer has to follow LIFO, that is last in first out, that is the newest employee has to be retrenched first. That is the rule which the employer has to follow while retrenching employees. And then in involuntary retirement, the third type of involuntary separation, the third type of method is layoff. Layoff is that you stay off from the premises for some times. Why? Because it implies denial, inability, refusal of employment to the employees for reasons beyond the control of employer. Certain conditions in the organization which have happened and the employer cannot do anything about it. It is not because of the employer, it is not because of the employee, and because of that the work cannot be done in the organization, and hence the employer has asked employees to stay off from the premises for some time. So, reasons for layoff can be decline in sales, shortage of raw material, natural calamities, again not in the hand of employees, breakdown of machinery, displacement due to technology, new technology has come and employees need to be trained, surplus labor and high labor cost. So, these can be the reasons for laying off employees. and when it is a temporary separation. So, the difference between layoff and retrenchment is that this is temporary in nature. There are chances of employees being called back to the job. So, management is likely to recall the employees then when work is available again. Layoff also may occur for an indefinite time, but we do not know after how much time employees will be called back. So, it can be an indefinite also. So, when layoff becomes a permanent one, then it is called retrenchment. This you must always remember. So, because the time is not fixed in calling back employees. Now, according to section 25C of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, a laid off worker is entitled to compensation equal to 50% of the basic wages and dearness allowance that would have been payable to him had he not been laid off. So, because laying off is beyond the control of the employer and of course the employee. So, during this period the employee is paid a compensation, layoff compensation, which is equivalent to 50% of the basic wages and dearness allowance. Other allowances are not included. So, 50% of basic wage and dearness allowance is paid as layoff compensation, and which basic wage and dearness allowance that would have been payable to the employee normally. That means, if he had not been laid off, then what would be the basic wage or the dearness allowance which would have been paid to the employee. Now, 50% of that will be paid to the employee. And the last type of involuntary separation for the employees is retirement. So, retirement is like all of us know that retirement happens on reaching a particular age, unless it is of course voluntary retirement scheme. It can be defined as the termination of service of an employee on reaching the age of superannuation. Sometimes retirement becomes mandatory when health problems start to jeopardize public health or the employee's health. So, sometimes then in that case, if the health of the employee is not allowing, his physical strength is not allowing him to work properly, in that case retirement becomes important or it becomes required before the age of superannuation. Some employees prefer to gradually reduce their hours as they approach retirement. So, as I said, some people will voluntarily go for retirement, some may reduce the number of hours. This process is known as phased retirement. That is, gradually they are preparing themselves for retirement and is usually prior agreed upon with the senior or the manager. So, important points for employee separations. First is, separation should be used as a last resort. Separation of any kind, unless it is coming from the employee, separation of any kind is a demotivator. It brings down the morale of the entire team if somebody is retrenched, if somebody is dismissed in the organization. So, it should be taken as the last alternative. When you have exhausted all alternatives, there is no way by which you can think of saving the employee's job, there in that case separation should be used. It should never happen as a surprise. We have mentioned earlier also that if you are dismissing the services of the employee, then the employee should be given a chance to explain, he should be given an advance notice also, otherwise the salary for that the notice period should be given to the employee, right. So, it should never come as a surprise to the employees, and if it comes as a surprise to employees, then again they feel demotivated, they feel dejected, the existing employees also do not feel good about it. Outplacement activities should be organized. That many organizations which are which care for their employees, they help the employee for financial planning. If the employee is getting lump sum amount, suppose he has gone for VRS and he has got lump sum amount, or maybe retirement, then he gets a lot of money from gratuity, PF, etc. So these organizations help these employees in financial planning. They will help them meet an expert who will tell how they must invest their money in future. And similarly, for employees who have been dismissed or who have been retrenched, the employer should help, the organization should help to get them jobs elsewhere. You know, the HR manager and the top management of the company, they must be having certain contacts here and there. So they must help them to get certain, at least they should get them interviewed certain places. Selection is secondary, but at least they should be given opportunities to get themselves placed or employed elsewhere. And the very important thing in separation is that separations should always be followed by exit interviews, or rather first exit interview should be conducted and then the employee should be allowed to leave the organization, because exit interviews give you the real picture of the organization. They tell us that what is going right in the organization and what is not going so right in the organization. Especially if the rate of turnover is high, then exit interviews assume more significance, because then you need to know as an employer that what is bothering the employees, why so many employees are leaving, what can be done in a better way. So exit interviews are very important. So these things an HR manager has to take care when he is handling employee separations. So I hope that now the concept of separation is clear to you. You are not confused between the concept of retrenchment, layoff, VRS, CRS, dismissal, retirement, etc. So thank you so much.